What is going on, Pokemon TCG enjoyers? I am joined by fellow CPAL board member Lucas Xing, fresh off his his win at LA Regionals. Here to talk about Chien-Pao in the new meta. So I think I've gotten a lot of questions, Lucas, I'm sure you have as well, about what we think about Chien-Pao in the new meta. So I kind of just want to give you guys like an updated list and talk about how it interacts with some of the new decks like Dragapult and Raging Bolt. Also talk about how it does into some of the newer matchups, like our old matchups have gotten newer cards like Lugia, for example. So I just wanted to start off with the list that we think is probably the way to go. We'll talk about some cards you can maybe add. But Lucas, this list is basically very similar to the 60 that Reagan and you and Grant have been running for this whole format. So let's start there. Why do you think this list is probably the way to go continuing into the new format?
Well, there aren't really many cards from the new set that really buff CPAL. Like, there's nothing really crazy that you can add into this deck coming from the new set. None of the A specs synergize very well. None of the trainers are very strong in this deck. So I think just keeping it the same is pretty good because this list has proven itself to be very strong. So I think it will stay just the same strength into the new format.
Yeah, I think I agree. So I think a couple questions people have asked is like, should we be playing the 70 HP guys? So I think 70 HP Fridge makes sense. I mean, the deck kind of already had that. I wasn't playing it. Like, now I'm playing it just to respect the Dragapult. It really helps you, like, especially when you go first, like, not have a play where you can be left without an option to get Baxcalibur. I think we both agree not to play the 70 HP Bidoof. Because I think when you play against Dragapult, they're going to want to target your Baxcaliburs first anyways, and that matchup's kind of like you want to go first, so like you just have the opportunity to evolve to Bibarel anyways. And the other thing is, right now the deck has two bad starters, hands or Frigibax, and your odds of opening one of them is around 8%, so like 1 in 12 games. If you add the 70 HP Bidoof, your odds of starting something bad are going to jump to around 1 every 8 games. So it's just like a big grief when you start with 70 HP guys. Which I just don't think the trade-off is worth it. I think Dragapult is winnable without it. So, I think another card we talked about, like you mentioned, Lucas, there's not many new cards from these sets, and people are asking about the Water Ogre Pawn. It does 100 and 120. What do you think about that? Does it ever make sense to include that, or do you think Greninja is already enough to have as a snipe attack?
It's never an ad because Greninja essentially does the same thing. Yeah, Ogre Pawn does slightly more damage, but the damage usually isn't super relevant. And most of the times, people are going to bench Manaphy against you already, so you still have to use it with in tandem with Cologne, as opposed to against Lugia decks. People are might not bench Manaphy, or might forget to bench Manaphy, or might not even have the bench space to bench Manaphy against Lugia. Against Cipao, your opponent will always bench Manaphy. And it's a 2-prize liability that's weak to lightning, so it can always get amped. So I don't think it's very good.
That makes sense. And I guess one other thing we've kind of seen in like the early metagame, a return of decks, like aggressive decks, kind of like the hands, the Ogre Pawn. A lot of them are playing Squawkabilly and like Mew EX. So do you think it ever makes sense to add Kyogre to this deck? Or do you think it's fine to omit it?
I think it's fine to omit it. Again, like what you said about increasing your bad starters feels really grief. And Squawk, like isn't that good. Using Kyogre to kill Squawk isn't that good because you can already win the prize trade by amping the Squawk than using Kyogre. So you can just do that kind of line of play instead.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. Cool. So another card we were talking about is maybe playing an Enhanced Hammer against Lugia so you can get rid of their Legacy energy. So I think if they attack you with Iron Hands early, that can be very scary. So what are your thoughts on maybe playing Enhanced Hammer?
Me and Grant were actually talking about this for a bit. I think if you're expecting a lot of Lugia, you might have to play it. And going to NAIC, I personally expecting a lot of Lugia. I think it's one of the top 3 decks. When Lugia does the Legacy Energy amp play, I think it's really hard for Cipao to ever come back from that. And E-Hammer is searchable off Irida, so you have ways to find it as opposed to like a Temple of Sinnoh or something like that. So I think if you're expecting a lot of Lugia, you might need to include it.
Okay. Yeah, I think my one issue with Enhanced Hammer is, like, let's say you went second and, like, Lugia pulls off a turn 2 hands on you. It's really hard to be able to go, like, Rare Candy Bax, enough energy on Chien-Pao, and Enhanced Hammer. But when you go first, I think it's very reasonable to be able to just, like, get the Enhanced Hammer whenever they put the Legacy energy into play. So you're going to play Enhanced Hammer. What card do you think we probably have to cut? Like, is it the Cologne? Is it Cyllene? Something else? What do you think?
It's probably the Cyllene. I would keep Cologne in. We'll talk about that later when it comes to the Dragapult matchup. But Cyllene was mainly for like because a lot of people were playing Devo, a lot of people were playing Airy in like decks like Zard and like Control and stuff like that. But those cards are kind of seeing less play recently. So, your resources aren't going to get as strained as much. So I'd probably cut the Cyllene.
Yeah, I think that makes sense as well. Just from my initial testing and just looking at things, like it seems like Dragapult's probably one of the only decks that plays Devo. And then Airy seems to be on the decline as well. And I think part of the reason Airy's on the decline is because Chien-Pao also seems to be on the decline as well. So, okay, cool. So I think this list is probably a good starting point. If you enjoyed playing this list in our current format, it's probably fine to keep playing the new one. So I wanted to talk about the Dragapult matchup first, maybe. Before we get to matchups, I just want to let everyone know Lucas and myself are holding an NAIC prep class this coming Monday, June 3rd at 7:30 Eastern Time. If you want to learn more about our expected metagame, which decks we think are good, see our preferred deck list, and have any and all of your questions answered, please feel free to sign up. This is my third time running a group class, and they've always been a fun time with lots of great discussion. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to either myself or Lucas. I've left a link to sign up in the description if you're interested, but for now, let's get back to some Chien-Pao matchups. What are your initial thoughts on the Dragapult matchup for Chien-Pao?
So, from my initial testing and from my initial thoughts on it, Dragapult is favored. I don't know how much. I don't really have the matchup in percentages yet, but it is definitely Dragapult favored. Especially if Dragapult goes first and gets like a turn 2 attack, then you're really far behind. They can set up a lot of strong math on your baby guys, like putting 200 on a Chien-Pao and then putting like 60 on a Bibarel, and then next turn going like boss backs, unfair stamp, or Iono, or counter catcher, or something like that, and then killing both the backs and Bibarel on the same turn. So the main weakness of Chien-Pao was like if your kind of support Pokemon died. Like that was a lot of ways for decks to kind of beat Chien-Pao sometimes. And Dragapult has ways to kill 2 in 1 turn while like disrupting you. So it's really, really bad in my opinion.
Yeah, so I think kind of what Lucas is talking about. So let's say the Chien-Pao player went first, you get like a kind of standard board like this, right? Like even if turn 2, like let's say we get a great turn 2, we get like a Baxcalibur, like a Bibarel like this, for example. Like let's just say you take a prize. If like the Dragapult player, like Lucas is saying, like let's say they went second, so I'll let them have just normal energies. Like they can set up like hitting a PAL like this, for example, and then put like 6 on a Bibarel, for example, or they can knock out your Bidoof in this example. Even if you get down to like 3 on them, let's say this Chien-Pao takes another knockout, I'm just gonna like leave a Dragapult here, just pretend they got another one. Like Lucas is saying, if they counter catcher and Iono you, like let's say they take out the backs, like you get Iono'd, you draw like 3, they can just knock out the backs and they can knock out the Bibarel here. And from here, like you really need to get a lot to make it work. You need to not only draw Rare Candy backs, but you probably have to draw like Super Retrieval, Super Odds, something like that. And even if we had like another Bibarel set up, the other problem is like if the Chien-Pao has like 200 from earlier, is like this is also like threatened to be knocked out. And even if you get a knockout, like let's say we evolve this Frigibax to Baxcalibur, you have to find a way to get 2 more Frigibax with it, because we've left our 70 HP Fridge in play. But now if we like play Rod or something and just get like the 60 HP Frigibax, our opponent again can just counter catcher or boss the backs and knock it out. So in a spot like this, like what you'd ideally want to do is, if you can, is like you'd want to set up like an Iron Hands, and then like Prime Catcher or like Bundle, I guess. Or they have a Rotom probably. So you'd probably like Prime Catcher and then like knock out one of like the smaller guys that they have. This way, like, and leave an energy on Chien-Pao. So you're kind of safe and like insulated. But like it's just so much to ask for. But like I mean, the Dragapult also, like if you put pressure on them, sometimes like they're gonna fall apart. So I think if you can, I think turn 2 hands or turn 2 canceling clone on Manaphy is probably really important. If you go first and like put some pressure, like I'd say you're probably slightly ahead. But if Dragapult like draws well, like they're gonna have the options to do these type of plays to wipe your board. So I think I agree with Lucas after like playing it a little bit more, thinking about it more. I think it's like probably a 40-60 matchup for Chien-Pao. I think Dragapult's expected to be, what would you say, Lucas, like 10% of the meta at NAIC?
Like 10 to 15, I'd say.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, depending on if Torrid influences the meta, I guess.
Yeah.
So I think that's one. So that's one problem we're gonna talk about for Chien-Pao. So one of the new popular decks is like not a good matchup. I think another thing is I feel like maybe you feel this way as well. Like Dragapult kind of feels like it's gonna like eat into some of Charizard's meta share. I think Charizard is probably one of Chien-Pao's best matchups in this meta, and having a good matchup against something that's like 20% is fantastic. So if Charizard's drop into that 10, even like 7% range, that's a good matchup that's really being decreased. It's getting replaced by one that's unfavored. Any more Dragapult thoughts, Lucas, or can I move on to the next one?
Yeah, I'd just say, like, if you're going first, if you can, I'd do the Cologne play over the hands play.
Yeah.
You want to just debilitate their board as much as you can. Other than that, nothing much. I think kind of have to be scared of Radzard sometimes, because some builds are playing Radzard now. But other than that, I think it's pretty. We already went through everything we needed to talk about with this matchup.
Yeah, I think the Cologne play too. Like if you pull that off, like you can probably just win. Like they either are gonna have only 2 Dreepies, or they'll have like 1 Pidgey, or even 2 Pidgeys. You can take out the Pidgeys. Actually, let me just ask you, if they had like, let's say a board. Let me say like, I don't know, Pidgey, Dreepy. Did I put the other Dreepy in the prizes? If they had like triple Dreepy, and like instead of Rotom, like, and you had the Cologne play, would you like knock out 2 Pidgeys, or you knock out 2 Dreepies? If this is turn 2.
One thing to call out maybe is actually killing the Manaphy, because I'm pretty sure most Dragapult lists only play 1 Super Rod, so it might be kind of hard for them to get their Manaphy back, so you can Greninja again. But I don't really know if that play is very effective. I haven't really thought about it too much, but I just do know that like the Super Rod count isn't super high. But I'd probably go after the double Pidge.
Yeah.
Without Pidgey, it's really hard to set up, especially if they have no energies in play. Then it's really hard for them to find their Neo Upper Energy, especially in this specific build, because that's the A-Spec they're playing in the Pidgey build, is the Neo Upper Energy, not like Unfair Stamp, like in the Xatu build. So I'd go after the Pidgeys here.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's like the lifeblood of the deck. But I do get your point, right? Because like it's going to be hard for them, like if you leave the board like this, to evolve like multiple Dragapults or multiple Pidgeys. So they would need to get like Rare Candy Pidgey, Rare Candy Dragapult, Neo Upper Energy, Super Rod Manaphy, which I feel like is just a lot to ask for. So yeah, I think that makes sense. If they had maybe an Energy and a Dreepy, do you think it's still worth going for the Pidgeys? I personally think yes, just because you have your Stranding Manaphy in the active. But what do you think?
I think yes still.
Okay, cool. So good to know. All right, let's move on to Raging Bolt, since this might actually be the most popular matchup at NAIC from what online tournaments are telling you. So, Luke, what are your initial thoughts on this matchup?
So my initial thoughts is that it seems like the Chien-Pao matchup with the pre-Iron Hands Rhydon, if you remember that.
It feels the exact same to me as well.
If you started a 2-prizer, you would probably lose. But if you start a 1-prizer, you're like really far ahead.
Mm-hmm. So
because you'll just win the prize trade better.
Yeah, so what Luke is saying, I'm just going to illustrate it here. So, actually, before we do that, do you think this is a matchup where you go second, Lucas?
I would probably... Let me think about that one. That's an interesting question. I think second, because their deck is way better going second, and your deck is pretty good going first and second. So if you call second, I feel like you'll usually have a stronger board state because you get to play Irida at the first turn.
Yeah, I think for me, like if we're saying this matchup boils down to starting a 1-prizer, like I think just going second makes more sense. Just because, like you said, like you can Irida turn 1, you can Cypher if you have to. So effectively, you get to play two supporters before you attack. So yeah, basically what Lucas is saying, like let's just say we're going second in this example. Like if you start a 1-prize Pokemon, I just put Bundle here. Here on their first turn, I'll just give them a bunch of energies. Let's just say their deck's set up. Something like this. So in a spot like this, you don't want to bench Chien-Pao. Like never bench a Chien-Pao on your first turn, like going second or first. Ideally, you want your first turn board just to be like honestly like what you always want with Chien-Pao, something like double Fridge, double Bidoof, and probably Greninja. And you want to be trying to set up for a Chien-Pao knockout on the next turn. Because like if you make a board like this, like your opponent can't really afford to sit there. Like they need to take a prize. So like they'll probably just knock out what you have in your active, beat a Bundle, a Bidoof, a Frigibax. And then from here, like once your opponent takes 1 prize, you're actually in the driver's seat as long as you take a knockout. Because if on your next turn you can just go like get a Chien-Pao, like let's say you get like a Bibarel or something, and you just like get a knockout on like their Raging Bolt, you're gonna go to 4 prize cards. And from here, like, you just control it the rest of the way, because, like, even if your opponent, like, gets more Raging Bolts set up, and like they knock out your Chien-Pao, they're going to go to 3 after they knock out your first Chien-Pao. If you respond with another Chien-Pao, you go to 2. And then if they get their last Raging Bolt in your Chien-Pao, they're always going to be stuck at 1. And then you just have to get like one more Chien-Pao, and you're going to win the matchup. So if you don't start a 2-prizer, and this deck is mostly 1-prizers, I actually think this matchup is fine. But I guess the one thing is when you're not starting with Chien-Pao on your early turns, like you're not putting energy into your hand, so your hand can be a little more tricky or slow to start. So I'd say the matchup's probably close to 50-50 just because you have that random variable of not needing to start with that 1-prizer and like you're not setting up with Shivery Chill. But I don't think like this is a matchup. I've seen some people say like, oh, this is so favored for the Ogerpon deck. I think it's probably close to 50-50. But what do you think, Lucas?
I think it's probably 50-50, if not favored to you, because the odds of starting at 1-prizer are just so much higher than starting at 2-prizer.
Yeah.
And your deck is, I think, once set up more consistent, so you'll be able to string attackers way more easily.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, you can win the prize trade back if they bench a Squawk. You can, like, use Bax to kill, like, a Greninja or something, or, like, set up a kill with, like, their 1-prizers and then amp for 3 against a Squawk. So I think you have, like, more outplay potential than their deck, so I'd probably lean towards Chien-Pao. Actually,
let's go over that scenario. Like, let's say you started Chien-Pao and, like, they knocked it out, right? So I'll just put them to 4 prizes. So, like, you're saying, like, a route to maybe fix this matchup then would be, let me pull up their Squawk. There, it's in their hand. So you're saying maybe a route to fix this is, like, you get your Prime Catcher, and you go for the Greninja, right? So you can use a 1-prize Pokemon to take a knockout?
Yeah.
Okay, and then in this case, I guess, they probably are going to just Raging Bolt you to knock you out. I'm just going to pretend we set up another one. So they'd be at 3 prize cards. And then from here, what you probably just set up a Chien-Pao and knock out the Raging Bolt, or hands if you can do it. But
yeah, and then I guess this play only works if you play Cyllene, because you need to Cyllene back your Prime Catcher. So if you're cutting that, then you probably can't fix the prize trade like that. But with Cyllene, like, you could probably still do it. Yeah,
because if you rip the Cyllene and like you get 1 head, you can just get the hands, then Prime Catcher the Squawk. So to me, I agree. That seems like the most obvious way to fix the matchup. So maybe if you're an Ogerpon player, like if you don't need Greninja turn 1, maybe don't bench it if you expect taking 2 prizes first. But this is a hard line for Chien-Pao to get. They have to draw the Cyllene at an opportune time to do it. So, but yeah, I think this matchup's fine. Just if you're a Chien-Pao player, do not start Chien-Pao. Okay. The last kind of new-ish matchup I want to talk about, Lucas, was the Lugia matchup, which we kind of alluded to earlier. So how do you think this matchup has changed now with like the addition of Legacy Energy?
It makes it a lot worse than what it was before. Before, it was pretty easy because you would just win the prize trade. You would use Ciphermaniac out to kill a Lugia. You would hands whatever, their Minccino or Arceus or whatever, and just go like 2-2-2. But now it's a lot harder because they play their own Iron Hands now, and they have Legacy Energy, which reduces the prize cards of like whatever Pokemon they want. It doesn't even have to be on Iron Hands. It could be on like a Minccino too, sometimes to correct a prize trade. So the Lugia has more options now to kind of like fix the prize mapping, which is pretty scary for Chien-Pao.
Yeah, I think 100% that makes sense to me. I think now you actually really, really need to go first. So I think the ideal scenario, as always, is a 2-prize knockout on your second turn going first. Like, be it knocking out their opening Lugia with your Chien-Pao, or if they start like Minccino, getting like an Iron Hands off on them. I think from there, actually, I think you win if you get 2 prizes on your second turn, because even if they start attacking with like even like a Legacy Energy Minccino, or if they Iron Hands you can just play bundle to get around that.
Yeah.
But I think the game becomes hard. Like, let's say this example, like we just knocked out like a Minccino for 1. Like if they just get like their ideal setup turn 2, Arceus, bullets and Minccino's for them.
They also have the Water Ogerpon now, so like some of your guys aren't evolved.
Yeah,
they can take those guys off.
Yeah, I mean, like from here, it's like even here, like they could just like set up a Lugia, and like knock out Chien-Pao and go to 2, and it's like normally you're like, oops, they take 2, and then like normally you would just like get another Chien-Pao, and you're like feeling good about the prize trade, knock this out. But then like I feel like they could even just like attack with like a Minccino with a Legacy Energy or something at this point.
Yeah.
Or no, they wouldn't actually. They would just knock out Chien-Pao with Minccino, and like normally in the past, like you'd feel completely safe here because you can just attack with Baxcalibur or something, take a 1-prize knockout, and then like they can't do anything because like you have a 1-prize board. But now that they can play Iron Hands, like what they can do now is they can just like Iron Hands for their last prize. And if they've made it to like this late in the game, like they're probably set up, they've had gifts, we don't play like Disruption, then they just need Legacy in some form of Gust to bring up like a Bibarel, a Fridge, or a Bidoof, even your Greninja. So I think now playing this matchup, like you really, really, really need to try and go aggro for 2 prizes turn 2. So that's either like hopefully they started with a Lugia or Hands or like Ursaluna or something, or if they started with like Minccino, like you have to go hard for the Iron Hands turn 2. Would you say that's correct, Lucas? Like that's kind of like the thought process you need playing this matchup now?
Yeah, you have to be a lot more aggressive. Before against like this format Lugia and typical forces, you could be a bit more passive. Like going second was even good. Like falling behind a prize was even fine. But now, like you have to be the aggressor and you have to be able to take these fast 2 prize knockouts before they can.
Yeah, and I guess the other thing, so we kind of alluded to this. So like, let's say we went second actually, and let's say we started, I don't know, like I started Bidoof or something. Like if your opponent gets that turn 2 like Hands knockout on you, like this is obviously the nuts for Lugia. Is there really a way to fix this, or like how would you go about trying to fix this if this happens to you? Or is there no way back?
With Enhanced Hammer, maybe there's a way back in, but it's just too hard because you take 2, they're already at 4, they just kill your Chien-Pao with for 2, and then they just need to find their last 2 prizes somehow.
Yeah. I think the same. Because, like, yeah, if you knock out the Hands and take 1 prize, you're just going to walk into a Cinccino. Your opponent's going to be up 2-5. There's no way to fix it. But even if you Enhanced Hammer in the spot, I'm not really sure you can fix the game. Because if you enhance the Legacy, take 2 prizes, I don't know, they can still just go, like, Cinccino, knock out Pao, go to 2.
Yeah.
And then it's like, you don't really have a good response from here. Because you don't have enough time to go single prizer. You obviously can't Hands again because... well, then they're just going to knock out your Hands for game, especially now that they have Blood Moon or Saluna. They don't even need Cincinos to one-shot your guys anymore. So, yeah, I think if they get turn 2 Hands on you going first, like, I actually just don't think the matchup's winnable anymore. So, me personally, like, I don't think you need to play Enhanced Hammer because I think it only works when you go first. So that's like half of the time against Lugia. So... I guess, so if you say Lugia is like 10% of the meta and it only works in half of your games, like the ones you go first, then it's only useful like 5% of the time. And I feel like it doesn't have a lot of utility in other matchups. So what do you think, Lucas?
Yeah, it might not be worth it, but it's just like one of the only tech card inclusions you can put in for Lugia. There's not really any other card you could play but Enhanced Hammer. And yeah, what you're saying is right, where it only works if you're going first. But yeah. It's kind of a hard debate whether to put it in or not. I mean, if you hit like a lot of Lugias at NAIC, it's definitely worth playing, but like you can't really predict that.
Yeah, 100%. So I think overall, just to cap it off, like the reason we both think Chien-Pao is in a weaker position than it was this format was its best matchup is going down in meta share. The new deck that might be really popular, like the Dragapult's a bad matchup. Lugia goes from being a really favored matchup in this format to probably, it's definitely an unfavored matchup in this meta. And Raging Bolt, the other most popular deck, is going to be like a 50-50 matchup. So I just think the deck's matchup spread overall has gone down a lot. It's still a fine play. Like if you like playing Chien-Pao, like you can still play it. I just think it's instead of being like tier 1 in this format, I just think it's going to be a tier 2 deck in this new format. So any disagreements, or do you just agree with that kind of assessment, Lucas?
Yeah, I agree. The big reason why Chien-Pao was really good in previous formats was like when Gardevoir was really good, it was like it took up a lot of the meta share, and Chien-Pao had a really favorite matchup into that. And then when Zard got really good, it took up a lot of the meta share, and then Chien-Pao was really good into that. But this is like one of the only formats where Chien-Pao doesn't really have a really positive matchup into the like tier 1 deck.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I think one of the things that Chien-Pao has always been so good at that like the other decks didn't get to do was Chien-Pao was like the ultimate deck at controlling the prize trade because you had Hands, you had Ninja. If you played Cologne, you had like a 2-for-1 option. And most other decks couldn't manipulate the game like that. But like now, like Lugia, for example, gets access to Iron Hands. Dragapult gets like damage counter spread. So it's kind of lost that uniqueness factor where like other decks now can control the prize trade against Chien-Pao. And then at the same time, like you're just like a stage 2 deck as well. So like if they put pressure on you, like you really need to hit things right away. So I most likely won't be playing Chien-Pao at NAIC, which I think is very sad to say. I think you as well. I thought we'd update all of our loyal shareholders at the CPAL Corp about what we think about PAL.
Yeah, we're going bankrupt.
We're not going bankrupt. We have a very big reserve fund, Lucas. I've made sure of it. The Chien-Pao Corp is going to stay strong. But I think it might be going through some downsizing in the next few months. So, sweet. All right, well, thanks everyone for watching. Let me know what you guys think about Chien-Pao in the comments below. And if you're going to be rocking it for NAIC, or if you guys have found any techs or cards that you think improve the matchups we talked about. So yeah, thanks for watching.